Piece by Piece is from Academy Award-winning director Morgan Neville, the mind behind Won't You Be My Neighbor and 20 Feet from Stardom. Despite the fact that it's a documentary, he still has writing credit on it, alongside of Oscar Vazquez, Aaron Wickenden, and Jason Zeldes. This documentary is about music superstar Pharrell Williams, and it's told through Lego. The whole thing. The reenactments, the interviews, the archive footage. It seems like a gimmick when you hear about it, but when you see the actual movie, it kind of fits in with the themes and how Pharrell views the world. Believe it or not, it's a legit artistic decision, even if it does seem a little weird on the surface. I'm going to presume the same could be said for that upcoming Robbie Williams biopic where he's a monkey.
I'm one of the biggest pop stars in the world, but I've always seen myself a little less evolved.
But the Lego also helps to make it all more entertaining. The fun animations really liven the whole thing up, although this would be a great documentary without all that too. It shows the full picture of its subject, and does so in an interesting way. And it's full of good music. And it doesn't tone down too much just because it's a Lego movie. Granted, Pharrell probably isn't a particularly edgy figure, but this still feels pretty unrestrained, pushing the boundaries of the PG rating. When it is toned down, it's done so in a winking sort of way, particularly when they show Snoop Dogg's recording studio as being full of smoke from a can labeled PG spray. There are even a few surprise uses of the word shit. It's censored sometimes, but other times it lets it go by uncensored. Just enough to remind us that the American rating system is fucking broken. But really, this benefits the movie when it occasionally ventures into darker territory, particularly a sequence about the Pharrell-produced All Right by Kendrick Lamar that also deals with the aftermath of George Floyd's death. That's right, we finally have Lego racism now. But no, this is not inappropriate for children, and the Lego stuff will probably make it the rare documentary that kids will actually enjoy watching. Pretty much people of any age can enjoy this. If you like music or the stories of famous musicians, this is for you. If you like Lego movies, this is for you. This is a really good example of both, full of fun and music.
And now the clowns will stop the show with your most kind permission. A rocket blast so you will know it's time for intermission.
Art the Clown has come a long way, starting all the way back in 2008, with his small role in Damien Leone's terrible short film The Ninth Circle, which got him spun off into Damien Leone's terrible short film Terrifier, and then both of them were collected into Damien Leone's terrible anthology movie All Hallows Eve, which was then spun off into Damien Leone's terrible movie Terrifier, which then became Damien Leone's actually pretty good Terrifier 2. And now here we are with him at last fully breaking into the mainstream, beating out that other evil clown at the box office. Although before the movie started there was a trailer that said that producers are making a cheap horror movie to cash in on Steamboat Willie going into the public domain, so I don't like this franchise's success anymore. I hate independent spirit. Anyway, Terrifier 3 is pretty good. Written and directed yet again by Damien Leone, Art returns after the bizarre mid-credit scene in the second one. Back for more carnage, except this time he's here for the Christmas season, as opposed to the other movies which were about Halloween. And yet they didn't release this movie around Christmas. They released it around Halloween. Why? But they also gave it a bigger budget to put towards the gore effects. Fun movie for me to watch right after Piece by Piece last weekend. And it proves that Terrifier 2 wasn't just a fluke. So, in the past I said the second one was fun despite being very hard to watch at times. Now I think I've become enough of a terrible person that I was on board with this movie pretty much the whole time. I'm not sure if I could ever revisit the bedroom scene again, but having come to this as one of the few horror movies that I was actually nervous to watch, it was still a good time for me, even if I did squirm a few times. It's over the top, but still a lot. Yes, it's still mostly gore, and the gore is for the most part as gruesome as ever. For example, there's one scene where Art nails somebody's hand to the ground, bites off the finger of his other hand, and peels the skin off of his head, all while the girl from the first one watches while pleasuring herself with a knife, causing a lot of blood to splatter out from under her skirt. And when it was over, some people a few rows behind me clapped. Yep, they keep coming up with new creative ways to kill people off, often badly. But behind all the grossness, Art is still a great villain who earns his place as the horror icon of this decade. Of course, a lot of his popularity is from his tendency toward ultra-violence, but there's also just his personality. He's unsettling, but also very energetic and charismatic. He never says a single word throughout any of these movies, and he still has more charisma than most other faces in horror. David Howard Thornton, who plays him, remains the best actor in these movies. But the acting from the entire cast is better than it's ever been. This franchise was never known for its acting, except for maybe the people who played Art, but in this one, there at least wasn't anybody who I thought was particularly bad. Terrifier 2 was headed in the right direction, but some actors, like the mother character, were really bad. Here there's thankfully nobody on that level at least. And Sienna is growing on me as a character. In Terrifier 2, my thoughts were basically, okay, at least she isn't completely flat. At least I could tell her apart from any of the other generic white girls Art was killing in the first one. But now, in this one, she's actually turned into a legit good scream queen. The movie fleshes her out by spending a good time dealing with her trauma, and in the climactic face-off with Art, she sells it like one of the great scream queens. And back to the generic girls from the first one, I should probably give Damien Leone credit for also doing the impossible, making the main girl from the first one interesting, even if he did have to change her completely. Now she makes a good evil sidekick. And the Christmas setting adds some nice variety from the others. The movie keeps up the relative story quality of the second one. I've heard this was supposed to recapture the nihilism of the original, and it mostly does, despite having the softness that comes with the second one's good versus evil dynamic, mostly through a dark ending that sets up a fourth one, and it left me wanting to know how this all continues. But on the flip side, as I mentioned before, I didn't really find the violence as disturbing as the second one. Maybe I've just gotten used to it since then. But the crowning achievement that they've been hyping up is a scene involving a chainsaw and a couple having sex in the shower, and it's not as bad as the bedroom scene. I thought that would be a good thing for me, but now that I've seen it, I'm not 100% sure. Although it's definitely a bad thing for fans of the bedroom scene. Although it is worse than the hacksaw scene from the original. In a way, parts of it resemble a gender-swapped version of that scene, except with more close-ups to make it even worse. And yes, for a franchise that gets criticized for saving the worst deaths for women, horrific stuff happens to the men too. And not just the shower scene. Some of the most disturbing, painful deaths are saved for the male characters. Disclaimer, even with my mixed feelings on the franchise as a whole, I never bought into the whole Terrifier is misogynistic idea. I think a lot of these complaints are basically true of most slasher franchises. All Hallows Eve may be a little more difficult to defend, but either way, this is less so than the others. Glad to see I can die horribly too. But unfortunately, things also feel kind of a little rushed near the end. The climax comes so abruptly that at first I thought it was another dream sequence, and it turns out I'm not alone based on some discussions I've seen about the movie online. Of course, after I realized that, I then had to start figuring out who was alive and who was dead. Some major characters are killed off screen, including one where it's just insulting that he can't get an on-screen death. Maybe this means he might still be alive in the fourth one, but if he isn't, then really, you couldn't have given him a better death? Maybe these deaths were cut out to keep the movie at 2 hours. I personally didn't think any part of the second one particularly needed to be taken out, so I'm just going to blame those who did. We could have had a well-paced 2.5 hour movie that shows what happened to these characters. But no, you had to make them rush things. Okay, but seriously, this is a great movie for gorehounds and a good one for people who just want to see a great slasher villain and have a very strong stomach. Damien Leone has gradually gotten better at these movies over the years, and while this one has its flaws that put it below Terrifier 2, it's still a close second. That's still better from a technical standpoint. This now iconic slasher finally gets the movies he deserves.